Most people think the Bible is a book of rules.
Right. Which is, well, it's a huge misconception.
They're wrong. I mean, it's a book of fire.
It really is. It absolutely is.
Like, did you know there is a section of the Bible so raw, so honestly erotic, and just completely unashamed that ancient rabbis used to forbid anyone under 30 from reading it?
Yeah, you had to be 30 to even open it.
Which is wild, because we've sanitized it over the centuries. You know, we've turned it into this polite allegory for Sunday school.
Totally sanitized. We put a massive filter on it.
But what if the shame you're carrying right now about your desires is actually the wall keeping you from God?
Oh, wow.
What if your physical hunger for your spouse isn't some distraction from holiness, but actually the very heartbeat of it?
That's a paradigm shift right there.
It changes everything. So tonight, we're stripping away the Sunday school filters. We're uncovering the Solomon secret.
No.
And it's going to completely change everything you thought you knew about sacred love.
It really is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift. Because we have this tendency, especially today, to neatly compartmentalize things, right? The sacred goes here, the secular goes there.
Right, in separate little boxes.
Exactly. We put our spiritual lives in one sterile little box, and then our physical, romantic, and sexual lives in another. But the text we are diving into today completely shatters that division.
It obliterates it.
Yeah, it forces you to confront the idea that genuine, unashamed physical intimacy is it's a divine blueprint.
And to figure out exactly what that blueprint looks like, we aren't just looking at one narrow perspective for this deep dive.
No, we've got a crazy stack of sources for this one.
We really do. I was looking through the research earlier, and the overlap is just wild. We've got rigorous theological journals.
Like the BJU seminary analysis?
Yes, exactly. An extensive verse-by-verse breakdown from them. But then we're also pulling from modern literary critiques of Jeanette Winterson's contemporary novel written on the body.
Which you wouldn't expect to see next to a seminary journal.
Right. We've got journals like Feminist Encounters and Lictito in here. And on top of that, cultural studies dissecting Toni Morrison's iconic novels from the Diva Portal archive.
What's really fascinating here is just the sheer breadth of these sources. We're looking at all these overlapping perspectives ranging from ancient Hebrew poetry and ancient Near Eastern cultural norms.
Way back then.
Yeah, all the way to modern feminist literary theory and contemporary sociological data.
It's a massive span.
It is. But our goal for this deep dive is to extract the ultimate mechanics of intimacy. Like, how does it actually work? But to truly understand this, we have to set a ground rule for you listening.
Yeah, you got to check your baggage at the door.
Exactly. Yeah. You must check your preconceived notions at the door. If you approach this expecting a standard, dry, religious lecture,
you'll miss the entire point.
You miss it. And conversely, if you expect just a secular academic breakdown of ancient poetry, you will also miss the profound integrated truth at its core.
So true. So let's just jump right into the deep end here. I want to start by looking at where we are right now. Like, society today, we are living in the year 2026.
Right.
And we are, without a doubt, the most connected generation in the history of the human race.
Oh, technologically speaking, for sure.
You have high-speed access to literally anyone, anywhere, at any time. You can swipe right and meet someone tonight. You can FaceTime someone on the exact opposite side of the planet in crystal clear resolution. But why are we the loneliest?
It's the great paradox of our time, really. If we connect this to the bigger picture in our sources, we can see that our modern environment has essentially become a digital desert.
A digital desert. I like that phrasing.
Our sources draw this really deep contrast between the profound physical and emotional richness found in the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, and the sterile reality of today.
Because we've replaced it, right?
Yeah, we've replaced deep, attentive physical presence with just scrolling. We've replaced covenantal intimacy with hookup culture.
We've traded soul-deep intimacy for scrolling intimacy, just flicking your thumb. Think about what that actually looks like for a second. On one side of our culture, we have this rampant hookup culture that is just completely devoid of true connection.
It's purely transactional.
Right. It's a consumer mindset applied to human bodies, like shopping online. And then on the other side, reacting to that, we have this highly sanitized, almost fearful religious culture.
Which is completely devoid of passion.
Completely. It treats the body like a ticking time bomb of sin. Like, don't look, don't touch. Both of these extremes, hookup culture and purity culture, they do the exact same thing in the end. They starve your spirit.
They absolutely starve it. And this is exactly where the Song of Songs comes in as a corrective measure, because it is not a dusty old poem.
No, it's not.
It's a revolutionary manifesto. According to the BJU seminary source, the title itself, Song of Songs, is a superlative construction in Hebrew.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. What does superlative construction actually mean for the listener who, isn't a Hebrew scholar?
Right, good question. So think of phrases from the Bible like King of Kings, or Lord of Lords, or the Holy of Holies.
Oh, gotcha.
In Hebrew, when you double a word like that, it means it is the ultimate unmatched version of that thing. So, Song of Songs literally translates to the consummate song.
The ultimate song.
Exactly. The text actually tells us Solomon composed 1,005 songs. But this one is declaring itself as the undisputed masterpiece of them all.
Out of 1,000.
Right. And what's really crucial to understand here is its genre. The song belongs to what biblical scholars call wisdom literature.
Like Proverbs.
Yes, it sits right alongside books like Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. Now, we often think of wisdom in the modern world as just, knowing facts or being smart.
Just having information.
Exactly. But ancient Hebrew chokmah, which is the word for wisdom, is about applied knowledge. It's the skill of living well. Wisdom literature is meant to teach the reader how to navigate the mechanics of God's world.
Right, like how things actually function best.
Yes. So just as the book of Proverbs handles really practical, gritty matters like how to manage your money, how to approach hard work, how to deal with foolish people, the song reclaims courtship, sensual love, and marriage.
It puts them on the same level of importance.
Exactly. It presents them as basic, holy universals of the human experience. It isn't some weird anomaly in the text. It's a foundational lesson on how to exist as a human being.
That honestly reframes everything for me, because if we look back at the very beginning of the Bible, at Genesis, the story of Eden is basically the ultimate eviction notice for humanity.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Like, the original design in Genesis 2 was a man and a woman who were naked and unashamed, complete vulnerability, zero barriers between them.
Total transparency.
But then the fall happens, and Genesis 3.16 details the curse of that fall, and it introduces this fraught, painful power dynamic between men and women. The verse literally says, "Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you."
It's the introduction of the struggle for power.
It's a tragedy. It's about shame, hiding, and inequality. Suddenly, the sexes are at war. They are literally hiding behind fig leaves.
Yes, it's the introduction of the external gaze as a source of shame. Suddenly, to be seen is to be judged.
Exactly. To be seen is to be judged. But our source from CBE International points out something absolutely mind-blowing about this. The Song of Songs reverses that exact curse.
It flips it completely.
In Song chapter 7, verse 10, the Shulamite woman declares, "I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me." It flips the Genesis power dynamic entirely on its head.
It really does.
Like, if Genesis is the eviction notice from the garden, the Song of Solomon is basically the author sneaking us back in through the back gate. It's screaming that your body is a temple, not a prison.
And the return to a psychological and physical Eden that's the central engine of the book. In this new metaphorical garden, the shame and the gender inequality that were introduced by the fall, they just paled to insignificance.
They disappear.
Right. And the text proves that engaging the physical world is a divine design by utilizing this massive, unapologetic cornucopia of sensory metaphors. The BJU source notes the text is just overflowing with references to flora, fauna, spices, topography.
It's so lush.
Yeah, we see doves, gazelles, myrrh, frankincense, cedar, pomegranates, saffron. It evokes sight, sound, scent, taste, and touch in almost every single stanza.
It's an absolute sensory overload, and that brings us to an incredible modern parallel in our sources. They highlight this sensory immersion by drawing a really brilliant connection to Jeanette Winterson's contemporary novel, Written on the Body.
Oh, this part is fascinating. The Lectito source discusses a concept developed by cultural theorist Lauren Berlant called world building.
And we should definitely define world building here, because I think a lot of people hear that and think of like Tolkien or writing science fiction.
Right, it's not fantasy writing. Berlant's concept of world building explores how social worlds and really deep psychological connections are forged through incredibly simple, slow acts of shared physical presence.
Okay, right. And in Winterson's novel, the narrator is intensely watching their lover make and eat soup. Just a simple bowl of soup. And the narrator thinks, "Let me be diced carrot vermicelli just so that you will take me in your mouth."
It's a very visceral image.
It's almost overwhelming. It's this image of desiring total, complete communion with another person.
It's profound because it emphasizes the slowness of intimacy. Think about making a real complex soup.
From scratch, not from a can.
Exactly. It requires low heat, it requires chopping, dicing, spicing, and above all, it requires time. The flavors have to meld together. This slow sensory world building is exactly what we have lost in our fast-paced 2026 reality.
We just want the microwave version.
Right. Today, we eat on the go, we're staring at screens, barely even tasting our food, let alone using a meal as a space to build a world with our partner.
Yeah, we're just fueling up.
But in the song, just like in Winterson's novel, the lovers use food and agricultural imagery constantly to describe their consummation and their delight in one another. The physical world is celebrated, it's not shunned.
It really reminds us that the physical world is beautiful. But here's the thing. The physical world only truly comes alive when it is given a voice.
True.
Which leads me to a question for you listening right now. When was the last time you felt truly seen? Not just looked at, not just perceived or glanced at, but truly deeply seen. That brings us to how the lovers in this garden actually speak to one another. There is a very specific way the Shulamite woman and her king communicate.
It's not just a generic, hey, you look nice today.
No, it's what we might call sacred gazing.
And this raises a really important question about agency and voice, especially when we're dealing with ancient texts. The BJU seminary source provides a stunning statistical breakdown of the dialogue in the Song of Songs.
I love this stat.
It completely upends what most people assume about the Bible. Remember, this text was written in a profoundly patriarchal ancient Near Eastern society.
A society where women were legally and culturally basically treated as property.
Exactly. Yet in this book, who speaks the most? The woman, the Shulamite, speaks 58% of the time.
Wait, hold on. I'm trying to reconcile this. We're talking about an ancient Near Eastern society. From everything I've read, women were essentially sidelined in ancient literature unless they were causing a problem or giving birth to a king.
That was the norm, yes.
So how is it statistically possible that she speaks 58% of the time? Did the original patriarchal audience did they just tolerate this?
That's exactly why scholars are so obsessed with this text. It shouldn't exist. It completely subverts the cultural norm of its time. She initiates the encounters, she drives the narrative forward, and she possesses just an unparalleled level of agency.
She is in charge.
She speaks to him and about him almost twice as much as he speaks about her. The man only speaks 30% of the time, and the remaining 12% belongs to a chorus, the daughters of Jerusalem.
That is just...
She is not a passive object being desired, she is the active, desiring subject.
That is wild for an ancient text. And the way she speaks about herself is also incredibly powerful. Like in Song chapter 1, verse 5, she declares, I am black but comely, or depending on your translation, dark but lovely.
Right.
She is an outdoor worker, so her skin is darkened by the sun, which in the ancient world was a sign of lower class, unlike the pale women of the royal court who stayed indoors. Yet she owns it completely.
She does.
Now, to be clear to you listening, our sources from Diva Portal use Toni Morrison's novels as a modern lens to explore this concept. We are looking at this impartially as a literary critique. We're just drawing parallels between how human beings construct identity.
Right, the literary parallel is deeply instructive regarding the psychology of the external gaze.
Exactly. The source contrasts Morrison's characters in The Bluest Eye and Song of Solomon. In The Bluest Eye, you have this young girl named Pecola Breedlove, and Pecola is tragically destroyed by the world.
It's a heartbreaking story.
Why? Because she measures her entire worth against white external standards of beauty. She desperately wants blue eyes. She internalizes the hostile gaze of the culture around her, and it literally fractures her psyche.
You see a similar tragedy with the character Hagar in Morrison's other work.
Yes, but the source contrasts those tragic figures with characters who find deep empowerment by grounding their beauty in their own authentic racial and personal identity. They reject the external metric entirely.
And that is precisely what the Shulamite woman does thousands of years earlier. The daughters of Jerusalem, the chorus, they represent that external societal standard. The Shulamite tells them, essentially, do not stare at me because I am dark, because the sun has gazed on me.
She just shuts them down.
She acknowledges her reality, but absolutely refuses to let their standard dictate her worth. And she is able to do this, in part because of how her partner speaks to her.
Oh, this is the key.
In a world both ancient and modern that literally profits from your insecurity, the song models a relationship where your partner's words act as an impenetrable psychological safe haven.
Yes, because the male lover doesn't just offer platitudes. He doesn't just say, oh, don't worry, you're pretty. His affirmations are radically specific. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Let's hear it.
In Song 1.9, he says to her, "I compare you, my love, to a company of horses in Pharaoh's chariots." Now, comparing your spouse to a horse in a chariot sounds completely wild today.
It does.
It sounds like telling your partner, "Hey, honey, you really remind me of a custom Ferrari."
Ah, exactly. To modern ears, it sounds bizarre, maybe even insulting. A horse. Really.
Like, thanks.
But we have to understand the mechanism of the compliment in the ancient Near East. An Egyptian royal mare wasn't just an animal. Pharaoh's chariots were the apex of military technology, wealth, and prestige.
Top of the line.
Yes. A mare bred for those chariots was the ultimate symbol of majestic, unparalleled beauty, raw power, and supreme value. They were adorned with gold and jewels. By using this metaphor, he is using the absolute highest standard of worth in his known world to describe her. He is speaking her ultimate value into existence.
It's detailed adoration. I love how Fiona Black's literary critique in our sources frames this. She mentions that this kind of language is almost an itemized, laboratory-like eroticization of the body.
An anatomical breakdown.
Right. He praises her eyes, her hair, her teeth, her neck. But in the song, this dissection isn't objectifying. It's done through a lens of total reverence. He describes her using the most intoxicating, valuable language of their time.
Like the spices.
Yes. He says she is a cluster of campfire in the vineyards of En-Gedi. She replies that he is a bundle of myrrh resting between her breasts. It's an entire private language built on unique value.
And what we need to extract from this is why this specific language works so well. General praise like "you're great" bounces off as it doesn't require the speaker to actually know us.
Anyone can say you're great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Specific, itemized adoration requires the speaker to have studied us. It proves we have been seen. But that profound level of affirmation requires absolute safety.
You can't just do that anywhere.
No, you cannot speak this openly or be this vulnerable if you feel you are being watched or judged by the outside world. This level of intimacy requires a sanctuary.
I want you to think about that. If your spouse saw themselves only through your eyes, based purely on the words you say to them, would they feel like a masterpiece or a mistake?
That's a heavy question.
It is. To create that masterpiece, you need the right environment. And that brings us to the concept of the locked garden.
Yes, the text shifts from the language of value to the language of boundaries. In Song 4.12, the man says, "A garden locked is my sister, my bride, a spring locked, a fountain sealed."
Okay, hold on. Let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
If I hear locked garden today, my mind immediately goes to like toxic isolation, like an insecure partner saying, "Call off all your friends, you only need me." That's a huge red flag. So how is a locked garden different from inherently isolating someone?
That is a really vital distinction to make. The text is not arguing for abusive isolation. It is arguing that true intimacy demands an exclusive boundary for protection.
Protection from what?
Well, think of a botanical garden. The walls aren't there to imprison the rare orchids. The walls are there to keep out the wild animals, the harsh winds, and the looters so the orchids can thrive. The Feminist Encounter source draws another brilliant connection back to Jeanette Winterson's Written on the Body to illustrate this.
Oh, the soup metaphor again.
Exactly. In that novel, the slow intimacy of making soup happens in private. It's an uninterrupted act. It requires low heat, dicing, spicing, and time.
Right.
It reveals its layers slowly, and it can only do so because the couple is insulated from the chaotic demands of the outside world. The locked garden in the song represents that same protected psychological space. True mutual desire can only be realized by attentive, long-term cultivation, just like an agricultural vineyard.
Because intimacy dies in the public eye, it breathes in the secret. And the text actually gives us a terrifying example of what happens when you leave the garden. Yes, there's a really intense, almost nightmare-like sequence in Song chapter 5, verse 7. The woman is searching for her lover in the city at night, and the watchmen who patrol the city find her.
And they don't help her.
No. They actually beat her, wound her, and strip away her cloak. It's violent.
What's fascinating here is what those watchmen represent. On a literal historical level, city guards in the ancient world were rough. A woman wandering alone at night was in real physical danger.
Right.
But metaphorically, the watchmen represent the harsh, judging public sphere. The city and its guards illustrate the genuine vulnerability and danger of stepping outside the protected, exclusive bounds of the relationship. When you expose your most intimate self to the public square, it often commits violence against you.
Let's apply that to 2026. Think about when you post a highly vulnerable, intimate picture of you and your partner on Instagram or TikTok or wherever. You're instantly unlocking the gate and inviting the watchmen of public opinion into your garden.
Opening it up to the comments section.
Yes. You're waiting for the likes. You're comparing your quiet anniversary dinner to some influencer's heavily sponsored trip to the Maldives.
It instantly degrades the intimacy.
Or maybe your watchmen are the relentless demands of corporate hustle culture, constantly telling you that if you aren't working at 9 p.m., you're falling behind. The text is warning us that the public square is inherently hostile to pure intimacy. The watchman will always beat you down.
And the BJU seminary source heavily supports this protective view. It introduces the concept of exclusivity as a major theological theme of the book. The locked garden means undivided affection,
which Israel struggled with.
Historically, the nation of Israel failed at this terribly. If you read the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel, they constantly describe Israel as committing spiritual adultery.
What does that mean exactly in a historical context, just for clarity?
It means they were prostituting themselves to the cultures, idols, and political alliances of surrounding nations, instead of relying on their covenant with God. They were constantly looking over the fence, thinking the grass was greener with the Egyptians or the Assyrians. The Shulamite woman is presented as the ultimate theological foil to this national failure.
She's the opposite.
Yes. She represents the pure, unadulterated focus that is required for a thriving marriage, which in turn models a thriving spiritual life. She doesn't look over the fence. Her fountain is sealed for one person.
So applying that today, it's about figuring out how to build a digital wall around your marriage. It's the absolute necessity of creating boundaries where the toxic comparison trap, the public opinions of your extended family, or the burnout of your career cannot enter and commit violence against your relationship.
Boundaries are everything.
I want you to honestly think about your own relationship right now. Who else has a key to your garden, and why are they still there?
That is the crucial application. A walled garden protects the environment from external threats. But we also have to ask a secondary question. What sustains the life inside that garden when the seasons inevitably change?
Because they always do.
Exactly. A wall can keep the watchman out, but a wall cannot stop winter from coming. When the initial spark of romance fades, what keeps the garden alive?
And that brings us to the fire. Because if you look at modern culture, most couples today just wait around for the spark to magically return during dry seasons.
Like it's out of their control.
Right. They think love is a candle that just occasionally blows out. But the Bible doesn't call it a candle. It literally calls it a flash of fire. Solomon teaches us how to carry the torch.
The climax of the book.
Yes, the absolute climax of the song, the philosophical peak of the entire book, is in chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. It says, "Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. Its flames are flames of fire, the flame of Yah."
The flame of Yah. That is perhaps the single most significant phrase in the entire Song of Songs.
Let's dig into that.
So Yah is the shortened poetic form of Yahweh, the name of God. By calling it the flame of Yah, the text identifies this marital physical love as a sacred divine gift originating from God himself.
It's not just a biological urge.
Not at all. It goes on to say that many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. The waters represent the inevitable hardships, the mundane routines, the financial crises, the health scares that every single long-term relationship faces. And yet, this love is unquenchable.
And it cannot be bought. I love this part. The historical commentaries from Smith and Isar point out a massive underlying conflict in the text.
The contrast of wealth.
Yes. We have King Solomon, who is historically known for his staggering wealth and his massive harem of hundreds of wives and concubines. But the text creates a contrast between all that royal wealth and the pure, exclusive love of a simple shepherd.
It's a huge juxtaposition.
The text says, if a man were to give all the wealth of his house for love, it would be utterly scorned. Love cannot be manufactured, it cannot be purchased, and it certainly can't be added to a royal harem as just another commodity.
This highlights the nature of this unyielding commitment. It is a fierce, protected possession. The text says its jealousy is unyielding as the grave.
Which sounds intense.
Now, we need to clarify that. This isn't the petty, toxic jealousy of an insecure partner checking your phone while you're in the bathroom.
Right, it's not paranoia.
No, it is the righteous, protective zeal for a sacred covenant. It is the absolute refusal to let anything destroy the union. And this brings us to a really profound connection with human mortality.
Yes, the memento mori.
Exactly. The Feminist Encounters source introduces the concept of memento mori, which is a Latin phrase meaning, remember that you must die. It's an artistic or literary reminder of the inevitability of death.
A bit grim, but important.
Well, in Winterson's novel, there is a heartbreaking shift. The narrator's lover is diagnosed with cancer. The body that was once celebrated is now failing. The narrator feeds their lover, plumbs the color of bruises as the cancer ravages her. It's a stark, unavoidable reminder that the physical body decays.
So what does this all mean for the biblical text? It's like love is the only element in the universe that can survive both the flood of many waters and the inevitable decay of time.
It outlasts the physical.
The song openly acknowledges the natural cycle. Fruits overripen, seasons pass from spring to winter, and our bodies age, wrinkle, and break down. But true covenantal love, the kind that is strong as death, it defies this physical decay.
It stands firm.
It's not just a fleeting feeling you chase on a weekend getaway. It's an indestructible baseline you stand on when the cancer diagnosis comes or when the money runs out.
And what's amazing is that when you look at modern sociological data, this ancient poetic truth is completely validated.
Really? The data backs this up?
Completely. Our source from Bible Hub affirms that spiritual commitment is the single strongest predictor of marital longevity.
Wow.
Why does the data show this? What is the mechanism?
Yeah.
Because when your relationship is grounded in this flame of Yah concept, you stop viewing your partner as a consumer good designed to make you happy. You view them as a sacred covenant.
That completely changes the dynamic.
When the initial spark fades, which it inevitably will, that theological baseline acts as a psychological shock absorber against divorce. Marriages grounded in this unquenchable fire literally change societal outcomes. They result in lower divorce rates, incredibly healthier environments for children, and profound societal stability.
Think about the imagery used in that climax. A seal on the heart and a seal on the arm. In the ancient world, a seal, like a wax signet ring, was a mark of absolute, unbreakable ownership, authority, and identity.
They were permanent.
Contrast that permanent seal with the fleeting, superficial likes, the temporary situationships, and the easy way out commitments we see everywhere in 2026. Is your love a flickering candle at the mercy of the wind, or a fire that consumes the wind itself?
If human love is this powerful, this unyielding, and this sacred, it must be pointing to something even larger than the two people in the room.
It has to be.
And this leads us to the grand historical debate surrounding the Song of Songs. For centuries, theologians and scholars have argued fiercely about this. Is this book just a literal erotic poem about human love? Or is it a grand spiritual allegory for God's love for Israel or Christ's love for the church?
Right, the classic either debate. People always want to put it in a neat little box. It's either a sex manual or it's a sterile metaphor about Jesus.
But the BJU and CBE sources definitively state that the answer is not either.
It's both.
It is both. The literal human-to-human marital love is the theological message. God specifically designed the marriage covenant from the very beginning in Genesis to be the ultimate earthly metaphor for his relationship with humanity.
You don't have to pick one.
Exactly. You don't have to erase or apologize for the physical reality of the lovers to find the spiritual meaning. The physical reality is the exact lens through which the spiritual meaning is revealed.
Here's the secret they don't tell you in Sunday school. Your physical ecstasy is a mirror.
A mirror.
When you and your spouse are truly one, completely committed and unashamed, you are participating in a living prayer. Your devotion to each other is the most accurate breathing picture of God's devotion to you. We aren't just talking about having a better sex life with communication tips. We're talking about divine worship through human touch.
And this is where the Silo source brings in a really profound ecological perspective. It looks at texts like Psalm 104, the Book of Job, and the Song of Songs, and discusses this concept of bodiliness and homeostatic balance.
Okay, homeostatic balance. Break that down for us. What does that mean in the context of two people in a relationship?
Think of a healthy old-growth forest.
Okay, like redwoods.
Sure. Every single organism in that forest, the trees, the soil, the fungi, the animals, gives and takes in a perfect self-sustaining loop. Nothing hoards resources. Everything supports the life of the whole. That is homeostatic balance.
Harmony.
The Silo source argues that when these two lovers are completely devoted to each other, their physical intimacy mirrors that exact same natural ecological perfection. Their bodies blend with the natural world.
It's not separate from nature, it's part of it.
Right. They aren't just having sex, they are physically participating in the balance of the cosmos. The Shulamite woman acts as the ultimate theological foil to human unfaithfulness. Where humanity constantly looks elsewhere, seeking satisfaction in idols, money, or power, she looks only to her beloved. By pursuing this level of fidelity in a marriage, couples are engaging in a physical demonstration of spiritual worship.
We're so conditioned to separate the flesh from the spirit, treating them like they are enemies at war with each other. The old spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Mindset applied completely incorrectly.
It's a very Greek, dualistic way of thinking, not Hebrew.
Right. But the song is telling us that the flesh, when placed inside the covenant of the locked garden, is actually the very lens through which we can see the spirit. It completely redeems the physical body. But, to make this real, to actually live this out when you wake up tomorrow morning requires immense intention.
Yes, and this directly counters a modern phenomenon that cultural theorist Lauren Berlant terms cruel optimism, which is discussed heavily in the Feminist Encounters text.
Cruel optimism, that is such a haunting phrase. What does she mean by that?
Cruel optimism occurs when something you desire is actually an obstacle to your own flourishing.
Give me an example of that.
Well, in the context of modern relationships, we are sold this fairy tale fantasy by Hollywood and social media, the idea of effortless, constant romance. We invest all our hope into this fantasy, but it consistently falls short of reality, leaving people exhausted, cynical, and constantly starting over with new partners. The optimism is cruel because the fantasy itself is hurting you.
Wow. We are in love with a fantasy that actively prevents us from doing the hard work of real love.
Exactly. But the Song of Songs redeems this entirely. By acknowledging the failures, the violence of the watchman, the changing of the seasons, and the dry seasons of the relationship, it anchors the ideal of romance, not in a fragile fairy tale, but in the steadfast, unyielding Hebrew concept of hesed.
Hesed, covenantal loving kindness.
Yes. It provides a realistic but divinely empowered framework for lasting connection. It tells you, it will be hard, the watchman will attack, and winter will come, but the flame of Yah cannot be quenched.
So how do we actually do this? Our Bible Hub source mentions practical disciplines to cultivate this flood-proof love. Things like reading text together, studying together.
Be intentional.
Praying aloud for each other's sanctification. Literally speaking that specific affirming value over your partner in front of God.
The sacred gaze in action.
Yes. And fundamentally viewing the marriage bed not as a separate, dirty, or merely secular space, but as a space of profound mystery where two become one flesh, exactly as the Apostle Paul talks about later in Ephesians chapter 5.
It demands that we stop treating our relationships as disposable commodities. We have to stop swiping, stop comparing, and start treating our covenants as living sanctuaries.
So the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves is this. Are we settling for a good marriage when we've been handed the keys to a sacred one? It's time to stop settling for good and start claiming the sacred.
The blueprint is there. It's been there for thousands of years.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought. Something for you to mull over long after you take off your headphones.
It's a powerful thought.
Our sources continually note that everything in the natural world decays. The ripest fruit eventually falls from the branch and rots. The most beautiful, heavily guarded, walled gardens will eventually wither in the winter. And our physical bodies, no matter how much we exercise or how many creams we buy, will age, wrinkle, and fail.
It's unavoidable.
But if love truly is the flame of Yah, and if it truly is as strong as death, then every single act of true, committed intimacy you share with your partner is a literal, physical act of defiance against human mortality.
Defying death itself.
Long after the physical body fades, the covenantal flame you've stoked in the dark remains the one thing in this universe that the grave cannot consume. So think about that the next time you look across the room at your partner. Remember that the shame you might be carrying about your desires was never meant to be a wall keeping you from God. It was always meant to be the fire that lights the way back to Him.